Okay, I'm asking you to read an article by J.J.C. Smart, Sensations and Brain Processes, from 1959, and I want to give you some guidance on reading the article. In this piece, Smart proposes what's come to be called the mind-brain identity theory, the theory that mental states, that is, psychological states, are identical to brain processes. You can think of Smart's paper as having three parts. The article is bookended by the introduction and conclusion. The third part is the middle section of the paper in which Smart considers and replies to a series of objections that he anticipates. In this lesson, we're going to focus on the introduction. Then we'll look at the other bookend, the conclusion, and after that I want you to read the paper. Finally, we'll return for a discussion of the objections. Start with the opening or introductory section. Smart aims to state his proposal and differentiate it from other similar proposals. He begins by explaining why he's unsatisfied with both dualist and behaviorist views. Against dualism, Smart notes that all other aspects of our world and our lives have been given broadly physical explanations, and he argues that it's not plausible that consciousness is the only exception to that general pattern. Worse, the dualist has to postulate that there are two things going on all the time, a mental event and a physical event, that are wholly distinct from one another, but nevertheless are somehow perfectly correlated with one another. We've already discussed this kind of worry about dualism. Here, Smart invokes Occam's razor, the principle that one should not multiply entities beyond necessity. Occam's razor is a simplicity principle. Prefer the simplest theory. Smart argues that it would be simpler and more economical to reject dualistic mental stuff that's supposed to be perfectly correlated with physical stuff and simply admit that mental events are physical events. Then, against behaviorist theories, Smart argues that while it might be plausible that beliefs are merely syndromes of behaviors and dispositions to behave in certain ways, that's not plausible with sensations. It's one thing to say that my belief that Paris is the capital of France is just a set of behaviors like the disposition to say, Paris, when asked, what is the capital of France? But Smart thinks that's not the right thing to say about what happens when we experience pain, or sound, or color. There, he says, Ryle and Wittgenstein are wrong. If I say I'm experiencing a yellowish afterimage, like after I look into a bright light and then look away, that's not just verbal behavior, says Smart, but it's a genuine report of something going on in me. Still, Smart thinks Ryle and Wittgenstein are correct that there's no special mental event or mental substance involved. Instead, he argues that the best thing to say is that there's a bodily event going on in me, most likely a bodily event going on in my brain. This leads us to Smart's proposal. Both the dualist and behaviorist are wrong. There really are sensations, but sensations are not events in my immaterial mind. Sensations are brain processes. The primary argument for the mind-brain identity thesis, according to Smart, is based on simplicity or parsimony. It's the simplest theory that explains the phenomenon without denying the phenomenon. Smart's proposal is so simple that there's not much more to say about it. Once we find out that water is H2O, we don't ask why they're identical. Instead, we ask what reasons we have to believe the identity. Why not accept an alternative view? So a full defense of the identity theory depends on deflecting objections to the view, and that's the task that takes up the central part of the paper. But first, there are three aspects of Smart's proposal that he wants to clarify. First, when he says that sensations are brain processes, he means to assert that sensations are identical to brain processes. Words like is or are can be used to express identity statements, but also to attribute properties to things. If I say strawberries are red, I don't identify strawberries with the property of redness. I'm just saying that strawberries, or most of the ripe ones anyway, tend to be red in color. I'm describing the strawberries, not asserting any identity claims. Likewise, if I say that Ada Lovelace is the first computer programmer, I'm not saying that Ada and the first programmer are identical. Being the first computer programmer is a feature that she happens to have, but Ada is not identical to whoever the first programmer was, no matter who that was. In contrast, if I say that Wonder Woman is Diana Prince, that really is a case of strict identity. Wonder Woman is identical to Diana Prince. Being Wonder Woman isn't just a property that Diana Prince accidentally happens to have, rather, she's identical to Wonder Woman. Put another way, Wonder Woman and Diana Prince are two names for one person. Smart says that his claim that sensations are brain processes is like that. When we're talking about sensations, that's just an alternative way to talk about one thing, and those things are brain processes. Second, and relatedly, anticipating some of the objections, Smart is at pains to make sure we understand that he's making a claim about the world, about sensations and brain processes, not about what we know or about the meanings of words. Just as Wonder Woman is Diana Prince, Clark Kent is Superman, and Venus is the morning star, and also the evening star. Sensations are brain processes. This is so even if nobody ever knew it was true. The evening star and the morning star are two expressions that refer to Venus, a planet, and that was true long before anyone discovered that there are two ways of talking about one and the same thing. Similarly, water was H2O long before anyone knew that. But all of that says nothing about the meanings of words, just about the things we use those words to talk about. Smart doesn't claim that the word pain has a meaning that should be defined or explained in terms of brain processes. He only claims that pains are, as a matter of fact, brain processes. Let me add at this point that Smart's idea of a brain process is just a placeholder for whatever neuroscience tells us about brains and bodies. If, as is quite likely, the processes involved in pain include activity in neurons outside the brain, or even in cells that aren't neurons, that's fine. His point is that pains are bodily processes, and it looks like brains and neurons are especially important parts of the body. Finally, and perhaps a bit confusingly, Smart wants to differentiate his argument for the so-called mind-brain identity theory from that of his fellow identity theorists who claim the theory is a scientific hypothesis. This last claim is one that Smart doesn't develop until the concluding section of the paper, and that will be the topic of the next video.